In December 1996, Carl Sagan whispered something to his wife that she swore never to repeat. He was dying from a rare blood disease, but that wasn't what scared him most. Druyan has kept that secret for 3 decades until now. She's revealing the hidden side of America's most beloved scientist. The marijuana addiction, the FBI files, the affairs that destroyed his family, the real reason Harvard rejected him. Carl Sagan taught us wonder about the universe. But his wife knows he lived in fear. What she's finally admitting will destroy his legacy forever. Carl Sagan was born on November 9, 1934, in a poor Brooklyn neighborhood called Bensonhurst. His parents were Ukrainian Jewish immigrants trying to survive the Great Depression. His father, Samuel, had once been a tailor, but now worked wherever he could just to keep the family going. His mother, Rachel, stayed at home, carrying deep sadness because Carl had been named after her mother, who died during childbirth. That pain never really left her. They lived in a small apartment and followed the Reform branch of Judaism, which was more open-minded than traditional ways. Everything changed when Carl was 4 years old. It was 1939, and he visited the New York World's Fair. He saw things that didn't seem real: air conditioners, giant robots, a talking machine, and something called television. He watched a time capsule get buried underground. He didn't fully understand it then, but something about that moment made him feel like the future was just waiting to be touched. Later, he said that the fair showed a world without poverty, clean and full of promise, and he absorbed it all like a dream he never forgot. When he was 5, he asked his family a question they couldn't answer. He wanted to know what stars were. His mom handed him a library card and let him go to the local library by himself. When he asked the librarian for a book about stars, she gave him a book about movie stars by mistake. But once they figured out what he really wanted, she gave him a children's book that changed his life. That book told him the sun was a star, and the stars were suns, only very far away. That moment gave him chills. He said it felt almost religious, like he suddenly saw the scale of the universe. It left a mark on him that never faded. His family later moved to New Jersey, and Carl went to Rahway High School. He graduated in 1951 at just 16. He was smart, but often felt like he didn't fit in. He wrote a deep, thoughtful piece called Space, Time, and the Poet for the school paper. He joined the National Honor Society and the Chemistry Club, but even when surrounded by other students, he felt like an outsider. His mind was always somewhere in the stars. One time, at a fancy dinner, he said out loud that Jesus Christ might have been an alien. Adults were shocked, but Carl wasn't trying to be rude. He was just always thinking differently. Teachers saw his talent and pushed him to go further. That fall in 1951, Carl entered the University of Chicago on a full scholarship. He was still only 16. The school had a rare program where science students also studied literature, philosophy, and art. He read Shakespeare and Freud while learning physics. He studied under Nobel Prize winners like Harold Urey and H.J. Muller. He became president of the Astronomy Club and joined deep discussions about the origins of planets. He even witnessed the famous Miller-Urey experiment, which showed how life could begin from basic chemicals. Carl took notes that mixed astronomy, genetics, music, psychology, and science fiction. He was building his own world inside his head, piece by piece. But something risky happened in 1958. Carl was now a graduate student and got involved with a secret government project called Project A119. The U.S. military was planning to blow up a nuclear bomb on the moon, just to show the world their power. Carl was only 24, but had top-secret clearance. In 1959, he made a mistake. He included classified paper titles in a scholarship application. No one noticed for decades. But in 1999, the project leader confirmed that Carl had broken the rules. Still, it showed how Carl wasn't afraid to take risks, even if it meant going against the system. By 1960, Carl had earned his PhD in astronomy and astrophysics. He focused on Venus. At that time, scientists thought Venus might be a tropical planet, full of life. But Carl ran computer models and found something shocking. He said Venus was a burning desert with temperatures near 800 degrees Fahrenheit. Most people didn't believe him, but in 1962, NASA's Mariner 2 proved he was right. He had predicted the truth before anyone else, and now people started to take him seriously. That same year, Carl supported Project Ozma, the first real scientific search for aliens. He helped look for signals from space using a huge radio telescope in West Virginia. They listened for months, hoping to find something from other planets. Carl was excited and told the public that aliens probably existed. Many scientists mocked him, saying it wasn't real science. But Carl kept pushing, saying that the math made it clear. There had to be life out there. In 1963, Carl joined Harvard. He worked on NASA's missions to Mars and helped prove that Mars had a very thin atmosphere. But not everyone liked him. He got into a serious argument with another top astronomer, Gerard Kuiper, over who deserved credit for certain discoveries. That fight hurt Carl's chances, and in 1968, Harvard shocked everyone by denying him tenure. They said he was too broad, not focused enough. Some said he was stealing credit. Others whispered that he just loved the spotlight too much. Whatever the reason, Harvard pushed him away. But Cornell University saw his potential and hired him in 1969, giving him the freedom to be himself. In 1966, Carl teamed up with a Soviet scientist, Iosif Shklovsky, to write a book called Intelligent Life in the Universe. They exchanged letters across the Iron Curtain during the Cold War. The book estimated that there could be 1 million alien civilizations in our galaxy. It was bold and scary. Isaac Asimov called it a pleasure to read. Another Nobel winner said it was one of the most important books ever written. The idea that we are not alone was finally being taken seriously, and Carl helped lead that change. In 1971, he helped design the Mariner 9 mission to Mars. It became the first spacecraft to orbit another planet. But when it arrived, a massive dust storm covered everything. At first, it seemed like a disaster, but that storm showed that Mars wasn't dead. It was alive with change. The mission had started with 2 spacecraft, but one crashed into the Atlantic just weeks before launch. Carl's team had to adjust the whole plan. They pulled it off, and the dust storm gave them more data than they ever expected. Then came the Viking missions. In 1975, Carl helped plan the first landers to touch down on Mars. By summer 1976, Viking 1 and 2 were digging into the Martian soil. The tests didn't find clear proof of life, but the results were strange enough to keep people arguing. Carl wanted to believe. He clashed with NASA's Bruce Murray, who said they were raising hopes too high. But Carl felt that wonder was important. The soil was dry and red, the temperatures freezing, but the mystery wasn't gone. In 1972, Carl created something that made people uncomfortable. He helped design a plaque to be sent into space with Pioneer 10 and 11. It showed a naked man and woman. Just a simple drawing, meant for aliens. But some groups were furious. They called it obscene. NASA decided not to include any nudity on future missions. Carl said he kept the drawing simple on purpose, worried they wouldn't approve anything too complex. But the plaque was still history. It was the first message from humans to the stars. In 1977, he led something even bigger, the Voyager Golden Record. With only $1,500 in 6 weeks, Carl and his team made a record filled with music, greetings in different languages, and photos from Earth. He even included Chuck Berry's "Johnny Be Good," which some found controversial. But Carl believed this was a gift from Earth, a message that showed not just our science, but our feelings too. Voyager 1 will float through space for billions of years. In 40,000 years, it may pass near another star. If anyone finds it, they'll know someone once lived here and tried to say hello. In 1969, when Carl Sagan was just 35, he secretly wrote an essay about marijuana under the name Mr. X. He talked about how it changed how he saw art, music, and even science. He said it made him feel things more deeply and notice things others missed. It was a risky move. The US was in the middle of the war on drugs. If anyone found out, it could have cost him his NASA connections, his job, and even his reputation. But he still wrote it, believing it mattered. The truth about the essay didn't come out until after he died in 1996, when his biographer finally revealed that it was Sagan all along. A year before that essay, in 1968, Sagan married Linda Salzman. She was an artist, free-spirited, and creative. At first, it seemed like a good match. They had a son, Nick. But by the late 1970s, their marriage was falling apart. Sagan was focused only on work. He believed her role was to take care of the house while he focused on science. She gave up her own career for him. But the marriage became cold. He was gone all the time and had affairs with other women, some of them colleagues. By 1981, it ended in divorce, just like his first marriage had before. He was brilliant, but struggled deeply with his personal life. In the 1970s, Sagan also became more outspoken. He wasn't just doing science, he started to speak out against the Vietnam War, environmental destruction, and the use of chemical weapons like Agent Orange. The FBI noticed. They watched him closely. He became a target because he wasn't afraid to say what he thought, even if it meant upsetting the government or risking his career. People either admired him deeply or saw him as dangerous. But he never backed down. Everything changed in 1980 when he launched his TV show, Cosmos, A Personal Voyage. It wasn't like any science show before. He stood in front of stars and galaxies, speaking in a soft, poetic voice, helping regular people understand the universe. The show reached 500 million people across the world. It was made with over $8 million, an unheard-of amount for a science program back then. It won awards, it inspired millions, and it made Carl Sagan a global name. Scientists respected him, but some also thought he was becoming too much of a celebrity. That same year, he started making public warnings about nuclear war. By 1983, he helped write a paper called the T-TAPS Report. It showed that even a small nuclear war could throw enough dust into the sky to block the sun. The Earth would freeze, crops would die, and billions could starve. He called it nuclear winter. He showed Congress what would happen, even using a model Earth to help them understand. Some people called him dramatic, others called him a hero. Even the Pope asked to hear more. In 1988, Gorbachev told President Reagan that Sagan's warnings had helped him change his mind about nuclear weapons. But Sagan's work brought danger. He received death threats from people who believed he was hurting the country. They saw his warnings as un-American, even though he was just trying to save lives. In 1982, Sagan faced another challenge. Congress had just killed the budget for SETI, the project that searched for alien life. Senator William Proxmire mocked it as a waste of money. Sagan stood before them and calmly went through the Drake equation live, explaining why alien life might exist and why we should keep looking. He won them over. By the end of that year, the funding was back. He didn't just win an argument, he changed minds. In 1985, he wrote Contact, a novel about aliens and faith. The story suggested that if we found life out there, it might shake our religious beliefs. Some Christian leaders were furious. They said he was attacking religion, corrupting young minds. The backlash was loud, but the book became a bestseller. It made people think. That's what Sagan wanted. But in the middle of all this controversy, something beautiful happened. In 1977, while working on the Voyager mission, Sagan spoke with a writer named Druyan. She had found an old Chinese song for the spacecraft's golden record, the record meant for aliens to learn about Earth. She called him to share the news, and in just 1 hour, their call turned into something more. They fell in love over the phone. 2 days after Voyager 1 launched, they were engaged. Later, Anne had her brainwaves recorded while thinking about love. Those signals are now flying through space forever, a record of her love for Carl. That's not just science, that's poetry. He continued to push boundaries. In 1987, he clashed with Stephen Jay Gould, another giant in science. Gould believed evolution happened in slow bursts. Sagan believed it could happen fast, especially on other worlds. Their argument wasn't just academic, it was about how we see life in the universe. Both had powerful views, and both refused to back down. In 1990, Sagan asked NASA to turn Voyager 1 back toward Earth. It took a photo from 6 billion kilometers away. Earth was just a tiny dot, a speck in a sunbeam. He called it the pale blue dot. His words about it, how small and fragile we are, moved people deeply. Some scientists hated it. They said he was being too emotional, but others believed it changed how we saw ourselves forever. In 1994, just 2 years before his death, Sagan made his marijuana use public again in his book Pale Blue Dot. He connected it to the wonder of the universe. It was bold. The war on drugs was still going strong, but he didn't care. He wanted to be honest. That same year, he published The Demon-Haunted World. He warned that Americans were falling for false beliefs, UFOs, fake science, conspiracy theories. He showed numbers from polls that shocked people. Millions believed they'd been abducted by aliens. Sagan said this wasn't science. It was fear and fantasy taking over. He begged people to think clearly, to ask questions, to use evidence. Back in 1977, he had also published The Dragons of Eden, where he won the Pulitzer Prize for suggesting that our fear of monsters like dragons might come from our ancient brain's memories of predators. It was strange, but powerful. In 1979, he attacked fake science again in Broca's brain, going after Immanuel Velikovsky and others who made wild claims. He said even wrong ideas deserved careful study, but they should be studied with real science, not just belief. Then, in 1980, the Cosmos book came out alongside the show. It sold over 5 million copies. One chapter shocked readers. It told the story of Giordano Bruno, a man burned alive in 1600 for saying the stars had planets. Sagan described how Bruno's mouth was clamped shut, so he couldn't speak before he was set on fire. His ashes were thrown in the river. Sagan used that to show how religion had tried to silence science again and again. In the early 1990s, new discoveries from the Galileo mission to Jupiter gave Sagan one of his greatest vindications. Between 1989 and 1995, the spacecraft found evidence of a massive ocean under Europa's ice. It could hold more water than all of Earth's oceans. For Sagan, this was proof that life might exist elsewhere. His belief that the cosmos was full of possibilities didn't seem so crazy anymore. Carl Sagan's first marriage began in 1957. He was still a young student at the University of Chicago when he married Lynn Margulis, who would later become a very famous biologist. They had 2 sons, Jeremy and Dorian. At first, it looked like a promising future, but things inside the home were much darker than anyone knew. Lynn later said Carl could be abusive and that she had to handle almost everything at home, even while trying to build her own career. She once called their marriage a torture chamber shared with children. It all ended in divorce by 1964. Years later, Carl's biographer said his obsession with science and his constant need for attention destroyed the marriage. He was so focused on his career that he ignored the damage it was doing to his family. This same pattern would come back again. In 1968, Carl married again. This time, it was to an artist named Linda Salzman. She helped him open up a little emotionally during the late 1960s and into the 1970s. Linda also made the famous nude human figure drawings that were sent out on the Pioneer 1 space probe. But behind the scenes, their home life started to fall apart. Carl didn't help much with chores, and he didn't take her work seriously. According to people close to them, he expected Linda to cook and clean so that he could focus on science. Things got even worse in 1981. That's when Carl started working on the Voyager Golden Record project. He met Druyan during that time, and the two of them started falling for each other. That same year, Linda and Carl divorced. People said it was bitter and painful. Carl and Linda had one son together, Nick Sagan, who later said it was hard growing up with a father so famous and so often absent. Carl and Anne's love story began in a strange way. One evening in 1977, both of them were at a party in Manhattan. Carl was still married to Linda, and Anne was engaged to someone else. But that summer, while working on the Voyager project, everything changed. One day, Anne found a beautiful 2,500-year-old Chinese song she wanted to include on the record. She called Carl to tell him about it. By the time they hung up, they were engaged. Anne later said it felt like a scientific discovery, something that made her want to scream with joy. Just 2 days after the first Voyager spacecraft launched on August 20th, 1977, they announced their engagement. They got married in 1981 and had 2 children, Sasha and Samuel. Even though people gossiped about how it began, Carl and Anne stayed together until the very end. They wrote books together and became one of the most well-known couples in science. But while Carl inspired millions, he often struggled as a father. Across his 3 marriages, he had 5 children. And for many of them, he was gone more than he was present. He was estranged from 3 of his 5 kids for long stretches. Even Anne had to remind him sometimes to call or think about his oldest sons. Carl's fame created problems inside the family. His kids had trouble finding their own place in the world. They were stuck living in his shadow. On camera, Carl looked like a kind, warm teacher. But at home, he didn't help with anything. He didn't cook. He didn't clean. His son, Nick, said that being his child was both difficult and amazing. He called his dad the best teacher he ever had, but he also saw how deeply Carl's work took him away from family life. Everything changed in 1994. That year, Carl was told he had a rare and serious disease called myelodysplasia. He was 60 years old. The disease damaged his bone marrow, and without help, he wouldn't live much longer. Carl's sister became his donor. He went through 3 bone marrow transplants and heavy chemotherapy. He almost died twice. Even during this time, he kept giving lectures and doing research. He said that without science, he would have died quickly. But the treatments gave him more time. They gave him 2 more years to keep going. He stayed hopeful and kept fighting. In 1996, he wrote the last chapter of his final book, Billions and Billions. It was finished just months before he died. The book warned about climate change and how humans were damaging the planet. In one part, Carl said that he had looked death in the face 6 times and 6 times it had looked away. But he knew it wouldn't look away forever. He said that death would come for him, just as it comes for all of us. Anne added an epilogue after he passed. She described their final moments. Family gathered around, and Carl's last words were simply, "Goodbye, Anne." He died on December 20th, 1996, at the age of 62. The cause was pneumonia that came after his final transplant. He passed away at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center in Seattle. Anne later shared something that shocked many people. Even as he was dying, Carl never turned to religion. He stayed true to his scientific beliefs until the very end. He was buried in Lakeview Cemetery in Ithaca, New York. He left behind Anne, his sister, 5 children, and a grandson. After Carl's death, Anne continued his work. In 2014, and again in 2020, she helped create new versions of Cosmos. These shows reached a whole new generation. What shocked many people was how Carl's old warnings were now coming true. His ideas about nuclear winter and runaway greenhouse effects were not just theories anymore. In the 1970s, Carl had studied how Venus became so hot. That work helped him see how Earth might also be in danger. Later, he warned that nuclear war could cause global cooling by blocking sunlight. And now, decades later, Anne said the same science behind nuclear winter was helping explain why climate change on Earth was speeding up. It showed how Carl's warnings from the 1980s were now real threats in the 2020s. Even during his final years, Carl never stopped speaking out. He warned people about the danger of ignoring science. In his last big interview in May 1996, he sat down with Charlie Rose. Carl looked very weak, but his words were sharp. He said that America had built a world of science and technology, yet most people didn't understand either one. He said that was dangerous. He warned that this mix of power and ignorance would someday blow up in our faces. And he asked, how can we run a democracy based on science when most people don't know anything about it? Years later, more surprises came out. In 2010, people found out the FBI had a file on Carl Sagan. It showed the government had been watching him for years. In 1983, he got a strange letter from someone predicting a space shuttle disaster and World War III. The FBI thought it might be a threat, but when they investigated, they found out the man who sent the letter had already been dead for 10 years. What made it even weirder was that the shuttle disaster did happen in 2003, just as the letter said. Carl had also been arrested twice in the 1980s during protests against nuclear testing. He climbed fences at the Nevada test site. He was trying to stop more nuclear weapons from being made. This showed how serious he was, even if it meant getting arrested.